Welcome back, geographers. Regions. Siberia is in the eastern part of Russia. It stretches from the Ural Mountains in the west to the Pacific Ocean in the east. Siberia is 25% larger than Canada, the world's second largest country. Central Asia is made up of 5 countries, as shown below. Kazakhstan is bordered by China on the east, the Caspian Sea on the west, and Russia to its north. Kazakhstan is the largest country in Central Asia, and it is also the most sparsely populated. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan lie along Kazakhstan's southern border. Turkmenistan has the smallest population in Central Asia. Both it and Uzbekistan are about the size of Minnesota. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan form Uzbekistan's eastern border. They are both small countries with small populations. The Caucasus region lies south of the Caucasus Mountains and between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. It contains 3 small countries: Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. Landforms and climates. In the Caucasus region, the Caucasus Mountains generally mark the border between Europe and Asia. To the east, 2 high mountain ranges lie along Central Asia's border with China. The Tian Shan cover most of Kyrgyzstan and eastern Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The Pamirs is a smaller range that covers most of Tajikistan. The Ural Mountains run north and south through Russia. They mark the boundary between Europe and Asia. They also mark the western border of Russian Siberia. These regions also have plains and deserts. In Siberia, the West Siberian Plain extends from the Ural Mountains east to the Yenisei River. East of the Yenisei River, the land rises to form the Central Siberian Plateau. Northern Siberia is mostly tundra, a treeless zone near the Arctic Circle or at high mountain elevations. South of the tundra is the taiga, a zone of coniferous forest. The taiga is swampy because, like the tundra, it is covered in permafrost. This is a layer of permanently frozen ground that lies beneath the surface of soil and rocks. Southern portions of the Western Plains and Central Plateau contain dry grasslands called steppe. Most of Kazakhstan has dry grassland plains and plateaus, with lowlands on the coast along the Caspian Sea. The Kizil-Kum Desert stretches from eastern Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan. The Kara-Kum Desert covers most of Turkmenistan. Much of Central Asia has an arid climate. The steppe of southwest Siberia and northern Kazakhstan has a semi-arid climate. Moving north and east from there, summers become shorter and cooler, and the winters become colder. Mountain areas of Central Asia have a humid continental climate. Mountain valleys have hot, dry summers and cold winters. Mountain foothills are cooler and get more rain. The Caucasus region is similar to eastern Central Asia. However, the Caspian and Black Seas make the region's summers cooler and winters warmer. The Black Sea gives Georgia's coastal lowlands a humid subtropical climate. The regions have a number of important waterways. Natural resources. Siberia's vast taiga contains about 20% of all the world's trees. The area's economic value is limited, however. There are few roads, and the quality of the larch wood that grows there is poor. Central Asia has few trees because of its arid climate. In some Caucasus lowlands, oak and other deciduous trees grow. Deciduous trees lose their leaves in the fall. In the mountains are pine, fir, and other coniferous trees. Siberia's Ob River basin has oil and natural gas fields. The Central Siberian Plateau supplies most of Russia's coal. Eastern Siberia also holds most of Russia's gold, lead, zinc, and iron ore. The tundra region near the mouth of the Yenisei River is one of the world's largest producers of nickel and platinum. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan also have oil and gas resources. Large coal deposits are found in Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan produces uranium. The mountains of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan have rich mineral resources, as do the eastern mountain areas of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Gold, mercury, copper, iron, tin, lead, zinc, and other metals are mined there. Most of the Central Asian countries use their rivers to produce electricity. This is also true of the Caucasus region. Only Azerbaijan is a major oil and gas producer in this region. Siberia. Sometime after 1000 BC, Turkic, Iranian, Mongol, and Chinese people began migrating into southern Siberia. These early people were nomads. Some were hunter-gatherers. Others were pastoral, which means their lives were based on herding animals. In the 200s BC, invaders came from Manchuria in northeast China. They drove many groups onto the central Siberian plateau. Invasions by the Manchurians, Huns, Mongols, and Tatars followed. Russian traders moved east and built small forts and trading posts. Some of these sites eventually became towns. By 1700, Russia controlled Siberia all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The Tsars who ruled Russia sent political prisoners to Siberia. Siberia lacked roads and other transportation. Between 1891 and 1905, the Trans-Siberian Railroad was built. This brought in more settlers. It also made it easier to export products from the area. Coal mines were opened. The steppe began producing dairy products and large amounts of grain. In 1917, the Tsar was overthrown, and the Communists took control of Russia. In 1922, the Communists brought Siberia under control. It became part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, also called the Soviet Union and USSR. Soviet leaders increased mining and industry in Siberia. The Soviets often used forced labor there. Labor camps called gulags spread across Siberia in the 1930s. Also, the Communists combined the lands of small farmers into large, government-run farms. These were called collectives. During World War II, Soviet leaders moved some factories to Siberia. After the war, Siberian industries continued to grow. In the late 1990s, oil production increased. Since then, oil prices have risen, giving the Russian government a steady source of income. Central Asia. For most of their history, the countries of Central Asia have been part of other empires. These include the Chinese, Huns, and others. Many conquerors wanted to control the Silk Road, the network of trade routes that linked China and Europe. Nomad groups that could not defeat the invaders often retreated into the region's deserts and dry plains. They were able to live in freedom there. In the AD 700s, the Arabs brought the religion of Islam to the region. The Arabs were replaced by other conquerors. In the mid-1300s, a conqueror named Timur overthrew the Mongols. Timur made the Silk Road city of Samarkand the capital of his empire. It became a center of culture and learning. Islamic centers of learning called madrasas were created there. In the 1700s, Tsar Peter the Great expanded Russia into parts of Central Asia. Russians wanted to grow cotton in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. To increase production, they began to irrigate, or bring water to, the land. They also expanded railroads. When the Russian Revolution began in 1917, parts of Central Asia declared their independence. 5 republics were formed in the region. But by 1920, communist forces had regained control. The republics became part of the Soviet Union. Soviet rule brought positive changes. They built dams on rivers to generate electricity. The dams also provided water for irrigation. The Soviets also increased industry by opening mines and factories to develop the region's mineral wealth. There were also negative changes. The Soviets resettled large numbers of Russians and other Europeans in the area. Local farmers and nomadic herders were forced into collectives. The Soviets tried to uproot local cultures. They closed mosques to end the practice of Islam in the region. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the republics declared their independence. The region's present-day countries were formed. Today, most struggle with a number of problems, such as modernizing their economies. They also must deal with ethnic tensions and dictatorial rulers. The Caucasus. The history of conquest and migration in the Caucasus region makes it one of the most ethnically complex places in the world. In ancient times, Georgia and Armenia were both independent before they came under the control of powerful neighbors. Around AD 300, each country threw off Persian control. They established their own kingdoms again. They converted to Christianity. In the AD 600s, Islam came to the region. The Mongols conquered much of the region in the 1200s. It became part of Timur's empire in the 1300s. Then in the 1400s, the Persians and Ottoman Turks competed for control of the area. Christian Armenians and Georgians suffered under Persian and Turkish control and asked Russia for protection. By World War I, Russia controlled the area. After the Russian Revolution, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan briefly formed independent states. The Soviet Union took them over in 1922 and changed the area from agricultural to an urban industrial region. During World War II, Germany invaded the Caucasus. Some ethnic groups were accused of helping the Germans. After the war, these groups were sent to other republics in the USSR. The Soviets punished other Caucasus people for loyalty to their ethnic identity and culture. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan declared their independence. Since independence, they have struggled with economic changes, ethnic tensions, and border conflicts. People and places. More than half of Siberians live in cities and towns, and most are near the Trans-Siberian Railroad. A few small cities and many towns also exist along rivers and Siberia's eastern coast. Siberia's population is mainly Russian. However, there are also Mongols and Turkic groups, as well as other indigenous peoples in Kazakhstan. Most Russians and many Kazakhs live in Alma-Ata, the capital. About 40% of the country's people live in rural areas. Turkmenistan is evenly divided between city and rural dwellers. Most people live along the Amu Darya and oasis areas to the south. An oasis is a green area by a water source in a dry region. Most Turkomans live in villages while most Russians live in the capital, Ashkhabad, and other cities. In Uzbekistan, most people live in the eastern half of the country. Almost two-thirds live in rural areas. In Kyrgyzstan, less than 40% of the people live in cities and towns. Tajikistan is mostly rural, but the country's mountainous terrain causes its settled areas to be densely populated. The Caucasus region is evenly divided between urban and rural dwellers. In Armenia, about two-thirds of the people live in cities and towns, with the Ararat Plain being the most heavily populated region. Most people in Armenia are ethnic Armenians. Georgia's Black Sea coast is densely populated, and 1 of every 4 Georgians lives in the capital of Tbilisi. Georgia has many minorities, mainly Armenians and Azeris. There are also 50 smaller ethnic groups. Azerbaijan's most densely populated area is around its capital on the Caspian Sea. The most populated rural area is in the southeast. Most of its people are ethnic Azeris. People and cultures. In Siberia, the main language is Russian. Russian is also the official language in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, along with the language of each country's ethnic majority. In the Caucasus, most Armenians and Georgians speak the language of their country's ethnic majority. Most Azerbaijanis speak their ethnic minority language as well. The various religions practiced in countries of this region reflect its history of conquest by Arab, Chinese, and Russian empires. Compared to the rest of the Caucasus, Armenians are homogeneous, or of the same kind. Recently, Armenians and Azeris have been fighting over a region with an Armenian majority that is part of Azerbaijan. In 1992 and 2008, ethnic minority groups in Georgia revolted, seeking independence. Russia sent troops to help the rebels. The Russians withdrew, however, and the tensions continue today. In Central Asia, Soviet rule led to civil war. Most urban Kazakhs live and dress like Europeans, while rural Kazakhs wear traditional clothing. Many Kazakhs live in rug-filled yurts, a type of round tent with a domed roof. Most Kyrgyz and many other rural Central Asians also live in yurts. The women stay home and care for their children while the men tend the family's crops and livestock. Uzbek families are often large with close relationships. Most Uzbeks wear traditional clothing. In towns and cities they live in small houses with courtyards, in which they spend a great deal of time. Most Tajiks live in villages with flat-roofed houses along an irrigation canal or a river. A mud fence surrounds each house. Relationships and challenges. After the end of Soviet rule, most Caucasus and Central Asian countries struggled to establish stable, democratic governments. However, this was not always easy to do. Often, the same Soviet leaders or former Soviet officials kept power. In addition, Central Asian countries struggle with Russian emigration. This has deprived some countries of workers in industries and businesses. Also, public health in Central Asia has suffered because of pollution and related health risks. The Aral Sea is an example of an environmental disaster created by the Soviet Union. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union built huge farms in the desert and steppes. Then they dug long canals to irrigate them from the Aral Sea. As a result, the Aral Sea has lost 90% of its water. The seafloor is now dry land filled with salt and farm chemicals. Winds carry the salt and chemicals miles away and people breathe them in, increasing lung diseases and cancer rates. Soviet rule also created border disputes between the Central Asian and the Caucasus countries. When the borders for these countries were created, the Soviets paid little attention to where the ethnic groups actually lived. In addition, several countries cannot agree on how to share the Caspian Sea. At stake is access to minerals, fishing rights, and transportation.